Most things seem to be designed to appeal to our inner magpie. Ooh, shiny, or ooh, pretty. But there's also another category of product that appeals certainly to me, and I think an awful lot of other people, and that's the tool, the thing that is designed purely with a singular purpose in mind, to be very good at what it's designed for, with no real regard for aesthetics. Think of the iPhone. Very pretty, very lovely, very sort of tactile and appealing to hold. Then think of the sat phone. To me, also incredibly cool. Robust, not aesthetically pleasing, but cool because it can make a call from anywhere in the world. And that brings me to this, the Ineos Grenadier.
With its body-on-frame construction, beam axles and a very heavy-duty steering link, the Grenadier has definitely been designed as a tool, and a tough tool at that. It's the sort of vehicle that looks like it would take a very large tree to stop it. Of course, to some it'll just be a toy, but the philosophy behind it seems to have stemmed from work first and play second. It'll come with a choice of two BMW engines, the B58 6-cylinder petrol and the B57 6-cylinder diesel, mated to the familiar ZF 8-speed auto. There are high and low ratios, a mechanical centre differential and front and rear e-diffs. Even if this is the first time you've seen a Grenadier, it won't come as much of a surprise that this is a vehicle meant to step into the gap left by the retirement of the old Land Rover Defender. The aim is for prices to start at around £48,000, and if you want to know a bit more about Ineos and the thought process behind the Grenadier, then have a look at our full walk around video. We'll leave a link in the description down below. Today we have an old mine, so that we can get a first taste of how the Grenadier performs in what should be its natural habitat. As you can probably tell, this is a pre-production prototype, so you'll hear a few warning bongs and see some snazzy red harnesses, an assortment of kill switches and a plethora of stickers.
I actually rather like the aesthetic of a prototype. It's pretty cool somehow. There's an element of something about it that suits it rather, I think, with it being a little bit rough and ready. It's just cool. Perhaps they should offer it as an options pack. Prototype aesthetic. Compared to that car that I saw of the sort of the mock-up of the interior of this, I'm glad to say there is actually, I feel like I've got a lot more room in this one, and you still got that nice command position, so looking out over the bonnet it's easy to see those front wings, you know exactly where the corners are, but fundamentally you've still got that nice sort of rugged interior. Still got all the switches up here, which I really like, the sort of the aircraft aesthetic. There's definitely a bit of old Defender in here in terms of the sort of feel of it, but obviously I'm not sort of knocking my knuckles into the window, which is nice. It definitely feels like a comfier place to be over many hours. One of the things that you sort of don't notice because it's an absence really is the fact that we don't have any instrument binnacle here. We've got a little screen down there, which has obviously got lots of warning lights on at the moment because this is a prototype, but then all the other information's up here on this big screen, and actually that's really rather nice because it just leaves you to concentrate on what's ahead, to read the terrain ahead without any distractions. The place we are today is an old mine. It's on the sort of French-German border. It's an amazing place actually. It's not terribly prepossessing. It's sort of pretty gritty, but amazing sort of black earth all around here and really slippery as well. Also an awful lot of caterpillar tracks and things around. Some good company. We've got the centre diff, which is locked in this, and we're in low range. We haven't got the front and rear diffs on this at the moment, but there's enough in here to get an idea of what it's like and what it is capable of. Overall, the first impressions of this are that it sort of sits, I think, somewhere between an old Defender and a new Defender. So you can clearly feel that it's got live axles, beam axles, and it's got coil springs, but there's definitely more refinement in this. It's much easier to drive than an old Defender. It's much more relaxed, it's much smoother. You've got a surfeit of torque from that 6-cylinder engine up front. So it's, yes, you don't have that air suspension ride quality to it, but equally it's not beating you up in the same way that an old Defender would. Things that I'm perhaps not so sure about, this steering wheel, I have to say, is something I'm struggling a little bit to get used to. It's the steering itself is pretty light. It adds that element of it all taking everything in stride, and it being very easy to drive, but the fact that it looks exactly the same whether it's the right way up or upside down is just sort of, I think definitely I'd want this top marker to be in a very bright colour if I had one, just so I was absolutely certain of where that top was, because you really do want to know that you've got your wheels straight. We're going to get out of this, are we? Of course we are. Right, and obviously on a descent like this, fine, we haven't got a manual gearbox, but you auto pop it across to there, hold it in first, and then it's like hill descent basically. You go over the edge. Just pop it back into drive. I would say I've been down one of the steepest descents I have ever been down in one of these today, which was quite eye-widening. So in terms of descent capability, I have absolutely no qualms about that whatsoever. The brakes, actually, talking of sort of the normal brakes rather than engine braking, that takes a little bit of getting used to because it is a very light pedal in this. I'm not sure whether that'll change on the production vehicles or not, but that definitely takes just a little bit of acclimatization. If you're wearing big boots or something, it's sort of, I'd probably like a bit more resistance from that. And with this easy steering and all the torque, actually it's surprising you can be nice and sort of relaxed with it and feel pretty secure knowing that you've got the capability obviously within the chassis but also within the drivetrain, so you don't feel like you've got to sort of have a run up at things or really sort of make sure you're absolutely in the right gear. Obviously you've got the automatic gearbox anyway, but because you've got all that torque to rely on, it just makes it smoother, easier. It really does, as I say, it feels like if there was perhaps a couple of generations before the current new Defender, this is where that sort of sits.
It feels like a very solid vehicle, undeniably heavy, but quite reassuringly so. And I don't think a day behind the wheel would leave you feeling physically knackered. Even though this was a prototype with plenty of things unfinished, it felt undemanding to drive, and the lack of assistance systems and locking front and rear diffs didn't seem to hamper it, even when I stopped in some fairly daft places.
That's what you shouldn't do. You see, you shouldn't stop on a slope like that where it's slippery, but I did. And it still got out of it absolutely fine, despite the fact we're running relatively hard tyre pressures today, and it is extremely slippery and muddy and boggy.
If you're interested in numbers, the maximum approach angle is 35.5 degrees, breakover angle is 28.2 degrees, departure angle is 36.1 degrees. The ground clearance is 264mm and the maximum wading depth is 800mm. More than enough to tackle most situations.
In some ways, the Grenadier had quite an easy but also quite a difficult task today because it could almost only fail. It hasn't, I can tell you that now. It's done everything asked of it and more. But because this is such an honest vehicle, because it's designed to look robust, to be utilitarian, you look at it and you expect it to do everything that it's done. If a Qashqai had done everything that this has done today, I would be amazed. But this, it's lived up to expectations. Lofty expectations, but expectations nonetheless. The next thing, well, to drive the final vehicle. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I thought I'd just show you some of the other vehicles we've got here. Pretty cool. Do check out the other Ineos Grenadier film on the channel, which takes you around the interior and gives you a few more details about the design and all that sort of thing. And maybe also check out our video on the new Land Rover Defender as well, by way of comparison. And subscribe. That's it, subscribe as well. Notification. Anything else? I don't know. See you next time.